Okay, so I'm just back from Poland, I'm seeing Metallica. Let's take a look and see what movies I've missed during that time. Oh, shit. I've really missed out, haven't I? Well, no need to worry. Just have to play a little bit of catch-up, that's all. Cue the intro. Hi, I'm Danny Quinn, and welcome to a special episode of First Impressions. As today, we're not covering one movie, we're covering two. Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and Sir Elton John in his big screen biopic, Rocketman. Why these movies in particular? Well, because not since Venom and Lady Gaga have I seen a more mismatched pair of cinema releases duking it out for box office glory. This film picks up several years after the events of the original Godzilla and follows the efforts of the cryptozoological organisation Monarch as they attempt to keep the Titans under control. Paleobiologist Emma Russell, played by Vera Farmiga, discovers the existence of the larva dubbed Mothra and is abducted by a group of eco-terrorists led by Charles Dance's Alan Jonah, alongside her daughter Madison, played by Millie Bobby Brown. So Monarch brings in Emma's husband Mark, played by Kel Chandler, to track them down and stop Jonah from unleashing a treacherous monster that Godzilla must duke it out with in order to become the king of the monsters. Oh boy, this is going to be a frustrating film to review. But first, let's go through the basics. Godzilla is pretty much one of cinema's biggest icons, right up there with the likes of James Bond, Dracula, Darth Vader, Batman, King Kong, and Michael Myers. And since his debut in 1954, he's been in well over 30 plus films, has been rebooted and revived countless times, not just in his native Japan, but also in America with mixed results. There was the rather lamentable 1998 film directed by Roland Emmerich, which was overhyped and overmarketed and really pushed to be the next Jurassic Park. Perhaps understandably, since Roland Emmerich had just struck it big with Independence Day, but the film was something of a muddled mess and felt more like a shameless Spielberg knockoff than a genuine Godzilla film. I already reviewed it this time last year, and if you want to see what I thought of it, I'll include a wee link to it up here. Godzilla more or less remained dormant in the eyes of the general public, at least outside of Japan. That is, until the 2014 reboot held by Gareth Edwards, and featuring a huge ensemble cast including Bryan Cranston, Aaron Johnson, Elizabeth Olsen, Ken Watanabe and Sally Hawkins among several others. And while it did better than the 1998 film for sure, it still did have a fairly divided response. Some people liked it, some people didn't. Easily one of the most contentious things about that film was the amount of screen time that Godzilla had, or lack thereof. And it does feel like the mixed reception of that film has had something of an impact on the direction of the Monsterverse going forward, as indicated by 2017's Kong Skull Island, which was very much an unapologetic monster mash that was fun for what it was, but wasn't really anything all that special in my opinion, as it similarly wasted an excellent cast including Tom Hiddleston, Brie Larson, Samuel L. Jackson and John Goodman, although the main exception is easily John C. Reilly, who was absolutely awesome in it. And yeah, I did review it on my channel a couple of years ago, and in addition to being a hideous looking review, in retrospect I do think I was maybe a little bit too nice to it, if I'm being completely honest. I don't think it's really that great, but it's not awful either. So that brings us to the new Godzilla film, King of the Monsters, which is a little bit confusing because that was actually the subtitle of the original American release of the film back in 1956, but whatever. It is what it is. And it does seem like it's something of a step in a different direction. Gareth Edwards, who directed the first film, is not involved, and in his place is Michael Dougherty, best known for his work on films like Trick or Treat and Krampus, and also as a writer on several of the X-Men films. And it seems like with this film, the general mission statement is to really win over fans of the character, and especially fans of monster movies in general. That really seems to be the big mission statement behind this film. But I did say this was going to be a very frustrating film to review, because I am completely split over it. I can completely understand why this film is just splitting people right down the middle. I've heard a lot of people say that it's a mess, that the story is shit and the characters are poor, and that the film focuses too much on the monster action. And then I've also heard just as many people say that they really enjoy it and they love it because it's more focused on the monster action. And that's definitely true, there are a lot of big monster fights in this film. So if you're looking to see this film purely on the strength of its monsters and seeing them duke it out, I think you are going to like this film. I think you're definitely going to get some enjoyment out of it. And the set pieces as well are a blast to watch on the big screen, especially the introduction of Monster Zero, aka the fan favourite King Ghidorah, which I think is probably going to go down as one of the best scenes in any Godzilla movie, period. For better and for worse, it definitely feels like a film made for fans. There's a lot of fan service, a lot of iconic monsters show up like Mothra and Rodan, and of course King Ghidorah. And I think it's cool that they even went so far as to incorporate some of the original Godzilla themes into the film's score. I find that they work quite well within the context of the film. Like, legit, anytime the Titans are on screen, the film is a total blast. But just like the other MonsterVerse films, the human element isn't particularly good. If anything, I think it's probably at its worst here. Just like the other MonsterVerse films, this movie has an absolutely fantastic cast. Kyle Chandler, Vera Farmiga, Millie Bobby Brown, Bradley Whitford, Sally Hawkins, Ken Watanabe, Charles Dance, David Strathairn, all fantastic actors who are largely wasted playing these very one-note, very one-dimensional and often contradictory characters. And it's not as if anybody is actually phoning it in or anything, everybody looks like they're giving it their all. Brown and Chandler are especially excellent, but the on-screen drama just doesn't really work as well as it probably should. And likewise, Vera Farmiga is really damn good as this woman who's obsessed with monsters, which has driven both a wedge between her and her family, and it has led to her making some pretty desperate and questionable choices. But it doesn't really add up to much. Her character motivation just feel unclear at best, and I think they could have improved this by taking elements of Charles Dance's character and putting them into her to flesh her out a wee bit. Even Godzilla himself isn't really given a ton to do, and that's kind of baffling because that was easily one of the biggest things fans disliked about the last film, the lack of screen time for Godzilla, but here, he really isn't given a ton to do. He doesn't really show up properly until about 45 minutes in, and then he's largely off screen for a large chunk of the middle section of this film. So if you were one of those people that was really disappointed by his lack of screen time in the last film, I can't really say that this movie rectifies that any. And what's worse is that there's a pivotal scene involving Godzilla that seems to actively go against the very point of the character in the first place. I can't really go too in depth about it, but it's a scene that seems to actively go against the very point of Godzilla in the first place. I mean, Godzilla is meant to be a symbol of the horrors of nuclear war. And the way that this film portrays nuclear weapons as if they're some kind of lifesaver really does not sit well with me, unfortunately. I just feel like it completely contradicts everything that Godzilla is about. So as you can probably see, I have very mixed feelings on Godzilla King of the Monsters, because I do realise that it's not perfect, and I do agree that many of the characters, they are one-dimensional, they're dull, and I do think the story is kind of a mess. And yet, I can't really bring myself to hate it. I really enjoyed a lot of the monster and monster action, and literally any time that the Titans are on screen, it's a lot of fun. I think I must have relished in literally every minute of it, and I can certainly appreciate the level of affection that the filmmakers have for Godzilla. You can tell that they're making this film with fans of the character in mind. But at the same time, I guess you could argue that that's also to the movie's detriment, because it doesn't really seem to think much about the casual audience, the people who don't watch the Godzilla films, who haven't really watched many of the Toho films or anything like that. It doesn't really give them that much reason to be invested in it. And I think that's part of the reason why it's not getting a ton of love from the general audience. And in the end, it's very difficult for me to decide where I stand on this film, because I do like half of it and I dislike half of it, so it's a real smack dab down in the middle. But nevertheless, I'm going to give Godzilla King of the Monsters a fairly moderate 6 out of 10. Yeah, I think that seems about right. Please keep in mind though, this score is entirely based on how I personally felt about it, because for me, film is a subjective medium. We're not all going to like the same thing, and that's definitely going to be the case with this film. It really does depend what you're looking for in a kaiju movie. If you're looking for a film that delivers lots of great monster action, go see it. I think you'll definitely get a kick out of it. But it really does depend on your tolerance for the story and characters. And since I think that is a pivotal thing for me in any film, even something like this, it does break the movie slightly for me. I just kind of wish the film had a stronger story, better characters, because I don't think those elements have to be sacrificed for a Godzilla film. you can still make a really good, really fun monster movie with likeable and endearing characters. And I do hope that with Godzilla vs. Kong coming out next year, that they can rectify this, and I'm pretty sure that they will rectify it. I'm pretty confident. Fingers crossed. But yeah, regardless, I do enjoy this film, even though I do think it's kind of a hot mess. This movie revolves around musician Elton John, played by Taron Egerton, beginning with him as a kid showing much musical promise, but being constantly ignored by his pushy parents, both played by Bryce Dallas Howard and Stephen McIntosh. As he grows up, he meets and befriends Bernie Taupin, played by Jimmy Bell, and they both go into business together as a singer-songwriter duo, with John as the singer and Taupin as the songwriter. But as John rises through the ranks and attracts the attention of Richard Madden's John Reed, he struggles to deal with his growing fame and popularity as he descends into a life filled with excess and self-loathing. Rocketman, of course, is a movie based on the true story of musician Elton John, and it's brought to us by producer-turned-director Matthew Vaughn and actor-turned-director Dexter Fletcher in the director's chair. And to me, it's just one of those movies where it seems like all the planets must have aligned. Not only is Vaughn included Elton John in a prominent part in the second Kingsman movie, but he's also worked with Fletcher a number of times in the past, most notably on the 2016 film Eddie the Eagle, which of course featured Taron Egerton as the titular character. Speaking of Egerton, this is probably the moment where his career really comes full circle. Not only did he get to sing an Elton John song in the movie Sing, but he's also got to act alongside him, and now he finally gets to be him. But another movie that Rocketman I think is inevitably going to draw comparisons to is last year's Queen biopic, Bohemian Rhapsody, not least because Fletcher actually stepped in to direct that movie after Bryan Singer was given the boot. I didn't review the film when it came out. I almost did, and I did see it in the cinema, but at the last minute I scrapped my review mainly because I just wasn't too happy with what I'd written about it. It's one of those movies that I really struggle to say anything about. It's not a terrible movie in my opinion. The music scenes are great, Rami Malek's great, and the finale at Live Aid is certainly a blast to watch on the big screen. But for the most part, it just sort of felt as if the movie was going through the motions and ticking off every biopic trope and cliche as it went along. And that brings us to Rocketman, and I think the question going into it I had was I going to enjoy this better than Bohemian Rhapsody? And after seeing it, all I can say is that the answer is a resounding hell yes. This film is genuinely fantastic, and I think it largely succeeds in many of the areas where Bohemian Rhapsody fell short. It does use some of the typical music biopic tropes, and if you've seen Patrick Williams' video on the formula of music biopics, I wouldn't say this movie deviates a ton from the formula. It does utilise it to a certain extent, but unlike films like Bohemian Rhapsody and Get On Up and Ray, it actually uses it in a fairly clever and unique way. For one, it often blurs the line between fantasy and reality, creating a very distinctively dreamlike film. And to me, it very much feels like a representation of Elton's music. Large, bombastic, surreal, larger than life. Going back to Williams' video on music biopics, he states that when making a biopic, you should pick the approach that best suits the subject, as opposed to trying to conform the history of their life to a strict formula. But what's strangely amazing about Rocketman is that it somehow manages to do both. And it really succeeds at doing both. It embodies Elton John, and I think that's one of the most important things to consider when it comes to making any kind of biopic. I think that's one of the reasons why Bohemian Rhapsody doesn't really work, because it doesn't embody the band Queen nearly as well as it could have. For a band that was so adventurous and so theatrical and so playful and so innovative with their music, it doesn't really come across on screen, and what we get is a film that feels very standard as a result. And what I love about Rocketman is that while it does take a lot of the typical music biopic tropes, it utilises them in a rather clever and inventive way. Like most biopics, it begins with the subject in a late period in his career and it flashes back to his childhood, but instead of doing the standard thing where he's about to start performing and then he needs to think about his entire life before he plays, it instead begins with him at a low point in his life. He's walking into a rehabilitation meeting dressed in this really large, ridiculous devil's outfit. It's the kind of opening that sets up what this movie is about perfectly. It sounds inherently ridiculous, but Fletcher's direction manages to mine a lot of drama out of the imagery, and I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of subtext that can be taken from this opening alone, intentional or otherwise. And throughout the movie, we cut back to Elton in rehab as he talks about his life, Compared to most biopics, it feels strangely contemplative and reflective. The way it's sort of set up, it almost feels like Elton's having an intervention stage inside of his own head, which is an interesting touch and not something I've seen in a film like this before. I think it's little touches like that that do elevate it above being just another standard music biopic. And yeah, it does utilise some of the standard biopic tropes such as the get idea, cut to hit song narrative, the heavy use of montages and cutting back and forth through time and skimming the surfaces in areas. I think this can actually be easily overlooked as it actually helps to put you in the mindset of its main character. There's a moment in the film where Elton meets a woman and then immediately we cut to them being married and then all of a sudden we're cutting to them being divorced. Normally this would kind of be a problem, but in this film I actually think it really fits. It really fits the sort of story that Elton is trying to tell, and it makes you feel as if you're alongside him as he's living life in the fast lane. Another thing that separates Rocketman from most standard music biopics is its focus on the music itself. As opposed to most traditional music biopics, Rocketman is pretty much a jukebox musical in biopics clothing. It takes many of Elton John's songs and interweaves them into the narrative with superbly filmed and directed musical numbers. And this is where I think Fletcher's direction truly shines. Most of the musical numbers are filmed in long continuous takes, and the choreography, the singing, and the way that Fletcher uses Elton's music to tell his story is truly spectacular. Fletcher's direction in general really shines as he provides the film with a distinctive energy and flair that a lot of biopics tend to really lack. It feels like it's made with a lot of love and affection for the man himself. But while Fletcher's direction is definitely something to behold, the real star of the film is easily Taron Egerton. He pretty much does for Elton John what Rami Malek did for Freddie Mercury, and by that I mean he's really damn good in this film. I know it's kind of a cliched thing to say by now, but I feel like he was pretty much born to play Elton John. And while it's damn amusing that his career is so tightly linked to the man, he really does an outstanding job in the parts. Not only does he do a tremendous job in capturing the showmanship of Elton John as a performer, but also the vulnerability and the insecurities of the man when he's off stage and he isn't dressed from head to toe in all this ridiculous paraphernalia. When he's being Reginald Dwight, the fat man from nowhere, not taking on the persona of Elton John, the soul man and songwriter. The film at its core is very much focused around Elton John, and as such, the supporting cast is quite small, with the likes of Jamie Bell as Bernie Taupin, the songwriter who provided the lyrics to match Elton's music, Richard Madden as John Reid, who was also in Bohemian Rhapsody and was played by Aidan Gillen. Littlefinger and Rob Stark have both played John Reid. Makes me wonder who's going to play him next. Maybe Jon Snow? That'd be pretty cool. They all do a really good job of the material as supporting players. Belle especially really shines as Elton's truest ally throughout the film, and the relationship between the two is easily one of the sweetest aspects of the movie. It gives the film a lot of heart and sincerity that really anchors the film in a big way. I did look up to see what was true and what wasn't, and it seems like the movie does mostly stay close to reality, but it does largely seem to play events out of order. In fact, from what I've heard, he didn't actually go into rehab until well after the time span that this movie takes place in. But for me personally, accuracy is not necessarily the same thing as quality. And I know a lot of people took issue with Bohemian Rhapsody for sort of playing around with reality and kind of fabricating events, but that didn't particularly bother me in that movie either. I think I was more bothered by how the film made the other members of Queen seem really responsible and clean-cut, compared to the more hedonistic and flamboyant Freddie Mercury. It just sort of felt like the results of too many cooks in that particular kitchen. I really don't have an issue with biopics sort of deviating from what really happened, as long as they sort of capture the spirit and essence of what the subject is about. I mean, some of my favourite films that are based on true stories like Goodfellas, Casino, Wolf of Wall Street, Raging Bull, American Hustle, Ed Wood, and The Disaster Artist, just to name a few, all take very heavy liberties with what happens in real life. But they're movies that I still love because they tell great unique stories about great unique or even downright despicable people. And the filmmakers tell these stories in unique and exciting ways. And in this film, historical accuracy isn't necessarily the main focus. The main focus is getting you inside the head of its main character as he navigates his way through this hedonistic rock and roll lifestyle, and comes out of it the other end a changed person. And as far as I'm concerned, it absolutely nails that. In fact, I think it's going to be a long time before we get a biopic that even comes close to matching this one. And if you couldn't tell from all the gushing I just did there, I absolutely loved the fuck out of Rocketman. I thought it was a fantastic movie. It's easily one of the best biopics I've ever seen, Taron Egerton is absolutely amazing in the lead role, and it's such a major step up from Bohemian Rhapsody that it honestly makes that movie look worse in retrospect. And Dexter Fletcher does an absolutely fantastic job in capturing the highs and lows of Elton's lifestyle, while also making it distinctly cinematic with its use of Broadway-style musical numbers. And it's not only a fantastic crowd pleaser, but it's equal parts bombastic, surreal, intimate, and personal in a way that very few biopics are. And while it does admittedly slip into a few music biopic cliches, it's done with so much energy that I can easily overlook that. I'm gonna give Rocketman a strong 8 out of 10. I definitely recommend seeing this film. If you're a big Elton John fan, I honestly can't recommend it enough. You'll love it. It's definitely required viewing. And if you're into crowd-pleasing musical films in the same vein of The Greatest Showman or La La Land, I strongly recommend this movie as well. I think you're definitely going to get a kick out of it too. It is such a blast to watch, especially on the big screen. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy it too if you ever get the chance to see it. So, that's my reviews on Godzilla, King of the Monsters and Rocketman. Have you seen either of them yet? If so, what did you think of them? Did you like them? Did you not like them? What did you like about them? What did you not like about them? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to leave a like, leave a comment, maybe even subscribe to my channel while you're at it. If there's anything I can do to improve my presentation, do let me know. I'm always happy to hear feedback as long as it's somewhat constructive. If you want to follow me on social media or support me on Patreon or check out my website, links are below down in the description. And until next time, I'm Danny Quinn, and I hope you have a pleasant evening. It's nice tea. It's really nice tea.